So I'm super excited to talk about the Tampa Family Health Center's community garden. And again, my name is Nicole Pinson. You are all welcome to come out and see me at the garden. And Kitty will go to the next slide. So today I'll speak a little bit about Tampa Family Health Centers. We're going to talk about our garden and our volunteers. And then guess what? I'm going to talk about how we tell our story as community gardeners. Because over the years I've learned a lot about that, and I just want to come up with some ideas and ways to track the work that we're doing. So Tampa Family Health Centers, how many of you are familiar with us? Anyone? A few? Very good. We have 18 centers across the Tampa Bay area. We are now 40 years old. We actually serve a large proportion of folks that are underinsured or have no insurance. So probably about 90% of the people who come to our clinics do not have insurance. We are a very important safety net. And one of the things that we do is try to reach patients in the community through the really forward-thinking ways that we work on community health. And so this garden is one example that I'll talk more about. And we have excellent team members, Dr. Ashley McPhee in the top, go back one more. Dr. McPhee is our top medical information officer. You see her right there. And then Sherry Hoback is our CEO. Next slide. And we have at the Osborne Clinic where I work, which is at the corner of 22nd Street and Osborne Avenue, you can see we've served over 37,600 patients at that location alone. It's actually one of the busiest centers in Tampa, and it's probably one of the most diverse locations. We have several different languages spoken in that center, many different people from all different walks of life, and it's a real interesting community space. So our garden is not quite planted for a year. It's basically just at its year's mark where we got the grant to implement this garden from the USDA NRCS. It's a $300,000 grant, and everything got planted in May. So we are really excited about celebrating our 1-year anniversary. At our garden, we do workshops, community events. We actually have a food pantry inside of our clinic. And the garden will grow fruits and vegetables. They are then harvested and taken right inside the clinic, and along with some healthy fruits and vegetables for feeding Tampa Bay and shelf-stable foods such as whole grain spaghetti, cereals, canned vegetables, fruits. People can get groceries on a weekly basis. They're also seeing a provider or a doctor, and they're managing chronic health conditions such as hypertension, obesity, maybe it's a food insecure family, or they have diabetes. So we're working on those health issues. We've actually seen an uptick since the pandemic in the number of people requesting services, and we are almost at capacity for our grant because there are more than 100 families that are coming in as patients on this program. That's a picture of our garden, and there's Agneta. We have 8 4-foot by 16-foot raised beds, and we've really just enjoyed building the garden and celebrating the work that we've been able to do there and reach people on a daily basis. We have an amazing team, and one area that we're looking at is nutritional psychology. One of our providers, Dr. Latamia White-Green, she is our director of behavioral health, and so she is linking mental health and wellness to the food that we eat and our diets. And there's actually science to that. It sounds really interesting, and we all kind of know it intuitively when we eat well, but 90 to 95% of the serotonin in our bodies is formed in our intestinal tract. So what we eat is important, and you can have a 25 to 35% reduction in symptoms of depression simply by having a better diet. So it makes a big impact in what we eat and how we take care of ourselves. So our garden is still very young, but we have some milestones. In our first year, not quite first year, we've already harvested over 500 pounds of produce. And this produce is picked from the garden and then taken into the pantry, or sometimes it's given out to community members. Like yesterday, we were in the garden, and we had 2 folks drive up asking us about what we were growing, and they just went home with armfuls of vegetables. So it's like fresh. And I can tell you that when we harvest it and we put it in the pantry, it's probably in there for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it's gone. So we have folks coming back for okra, coming back for tomatoes. We did a carrot harvest where we harvested about 15 pounds of carrots in one afternoon. And we just went through the lobby and we asked patients, do you want some fresh carrots? Everybody wanted fresh carrots. So when we talk about, making food, growing it, and giving it to the community, people who want to try something new, people who are in need, people, even our employees are very grateful to have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. We're doing it very fast and getting it out into the community. So it's been really interesting. We've had some feedback from patients for our Food RX program, which is basically a referral. They see a provider, the patients do, and then if they have one of those conditions, they actually get a prescription to come and get healthy fruits and vegetables. So we do a pre-post survey on that. We have seen one of our questions is, how many servings of fresh fruits and vegetables do you eat every day? People say 0. Do you have access to fresh fruits and vegetables? I do not have access. I cannot afford them. We have a mom that's in our program. She absolutely said she cannot afford fresh fruits and vegetables right now. She's a brand new mom. So you can kind of understand how these programs are really making a difference. And if you are a community gardener, I imagine it's making a difference in your own family's life and probably in the life of your neighbors and your community. So the impacts are very far-reaching from even small projects. So about our garden, we have already given out over 20,000 seeds to the community. We have given away almost 400 vegetable gardening kits, and you can see that through our Food RX program, we have served almost 700 patients. And again, it hasn't even been quite a year yet, so it's pretty exciting. Next slide. Typically, we do our programs for the community. You are all invited. You can remember the second Saturday of the month from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Our next presentation, everyone will get to take home a microgreen kit, and we're going to talk about the nutritional aspects of microgreens. This coming second Saturday in April, we're actually going to do it on April 27th, because I will be at the Worm Festival in Sapchaki on Saturday. So, have you all ever been to the Worm Festival? Anybody? Is it worth going to?
Yeah, you gotta go there and grunt.
I'm not grunting, but for those of you who don't know what it is, they actually use like a historic method of getting the worms out of the soil, so you can see it online. So that's what I'm doing this Saturday, this coming Saturday. Next slide, please. Yes, go back. Thank you, Kitty. Sorry, it's usually hard for you to quicker. So about our volunteers. Community gardens, we really rely on volunteers, and volunteers are super important. Back when I worked at Extension, I spent a lot of time communicating with people the value of volunteers, because folks think, oh, volunteers are just there. They're just going to show up and, they're here to help us do tasks, and that's not true. Volunteers make a big difference. So at our garden, we've had over 600 volunteer hours. I'm sure you all are volunteers in and of your own projects and the things that you work on. We have 26 community partnerships that we formed. And what I think is really important is over 100 people learned about the garden the first time through volunteering. And you all are seeing this, in your own community gardens. You can see how it makes an impact on people who are new to gardening or new to the community or learning about something for the first time. And the community gardens are kind of like that gateway to get people interested and involved. So this is also something that I find really important. We track where our volunteers are coming from which zip codes. And so sometimes when we've talked about volunteering, sometimes people say, well, folks from certain areas don't volunteer. We have actually found out where we're located. We have about 28% of our volunteers coming from the local community and the neighborhood. And then 72% are coming from other zip codes and counties. This is really interesting to communicate with folks about where people are coming from to volunteer and help in your garden. So we've had people from Pinellas County come. We've had people from Pasco County. But again, we have 28% of the people coming right from where Osborne is. And sometimes the folks around where we're located, they don't have a lot of means to get to places. They have to have a walkable situation. They need to be able to take a bus, and it needs to be accessible. So we've been able to see that we do have a good amount of community volunteers. Some of your gardens might be higher, some of them might be lower, but keeping track of where people are coming from is a great way to kind of see who your volunteers are. So some of us know this intuitively, but there's actually scientific research to support this. How many of you think volunteering helps improve your happiness? Raise your hands. Almost everybody in the room. What about your life satisfaction? Yeah. What about your physical health? Because we're moving, we're getting out there, we're planting. These are just 6 areas that volunteering actually does improve your health, and there's scientific research to support it. If anybody wants footnotes or the links to any of this data, just send me an email and I can send this to you. Gardening has a lot of really great benefits, and we do know this, but what you eat matters, what you're doing in the garden matters, the community relationships matter. There was a study, and I want to share this with you, and I've got my notes because I can't remember all these percentages, but of people who volunteer, and how many of us are volunteers? Raise your hands. Okay, a good chunk. So 25% of volunteers in this particular survey said volunteering helps them manage a chronic illness. 94% say it improves their mood. 95% says it makes their community better. 96% it enriches their purpose in life. Can you imagine if each one of us have a better purpose in life, like a better sense of what our purpose is? And then 78% said it lowers their stress. So just being a volunteer can have all of these impacts on you, and if you have a collective community garden or a group of people, there is scientific data. Now, why is this important? This is important because when we're communicating to our city, to our counties, to people who want to, we want to write a grant for, we can communicate this data, and we can even check with our community garden members to see if these results line up. Most of the time it does. Next slide. So this is a picture of some student volunteers. We have some high school students that are coming over from Middleton every Wednesday after school. I'm really proud of these students because they have self-formed a group, and they found me, and they're like, Miss Nicole, can we come over and help out in the garden? I'm like, absolutely, let's do Wednesdays after school. So this was the first time they've ever harvested cabbages. They were definitely weighing the cabbages to see who had the biggest cabbage, and I think the cabbage on the right was the biggest. But it's really amazing because you have different experiences with people through volunteering, and I'm again really impressed with the high school students. Okay, so I want to transition a little bit to telling our story. If we had more time, we could talk about this as a group. But I want you to think about what kinds of things do you measure or track as a community gardener or as a community garden. And then the next slide. Do you think it's easy or challenging to tell your community garden story? So we'll do a quick hand raise. Who thinks it's very easy to tell your community garden story? Okay, just a couple people. How many of you think it's challenging to sometimes communicate what we do? All right, and then there's a few folks that didn't raise hands, so we don't know where they stand. That's okay. I think it's really important to talk about community gardens. We have a room full of us right now, and each one of us are doing things kind of similar and slightly different. But you talked about, Kitty, you and your team, creating an app that really can talk about, what we're doing and selling and the produce and things like that. If we could really think about our community-wide impacts, that is another way to explain why community gardens are important to our Tampa Bay area. So go to the next slide. So there's a lot of different ways that you can track what you're doing in your garden, and these are some things that I was brainstorming and coming up with. I'm sure some of you are already doing this. So if you want to focus on harvest, you can think about things like crop count and harvest count. So you want to talk about how many crops are in your garden or crops. You could also talk about landfill waste and compost. Next slide. Rainwater harvesting or volunteers. Skills sharing. How many people share a skill? Or even moods. You might think, how do I track moods, right? That can be kind of hard. We did it after Hurricane Idalia. We actually had a volunteer day, and we knew people would be stressed. So do you remember those old little tear-off things where you put your phone over when you have in college or around dorms? We had mood words, and people would put them in an envelope. So this is my mood coming into the garden. This is my mood leaving the garden. After Hurricane Idalia, we had an 80% increase in positive moods just from volunteering for 2 hours. So simple things like that. Talk about healthy eating, the sales of foods, donations, and the number of workshops. These are all different ways that you can track it. These are tomatoes that some of those Middleton students tasted for the very first time. They've never tasted a fresh tomato before. So that is something that we've been just talking about. The other thing I want to mention is the USDA has brand new cutout indicators. And I used to work in Extension, so please don't eye roll at these next few slides. But indicators can be very helpful for helping you to track information. And I've highlighted some of the ones that will work for us in the next couple of slides. But many of the things that we're talking about, you can find different ways to measure your garden. So you can go to the next slide, Katie. If anybody wants a copy of this, you can find this on the USDA website. But again, this is brand new. And if you're looking at ways to track your garden and your produce or the impacts of your garden, these are some of the different categories that they have that you might find helpful. So food security, food pounds produced. Next slide. Cost savings, number of volunteers, amount of water saved. And there's even more. But for you, Kitty, I can see this one for the coalition, number of conferences, new people that have adopted a sustainable agriculture practice. This can seem like a little, maybe it's boring, maybe it's not interesting, but when you're communicating to people about the impacts of your garden, again, this just got rolled out with the USDA. They're saying this is what matters to the US government about gardens and community gardens. So they've told us, pull like 15 of these, no more than 15, and report on your garden and tell us how it's doing. So maybe as a committee or as a group, you all can get together and identify which impacts are important to you, and then create a little report, a one-page sheet, and this is what we're doing, and these are our impacts. So to sum it up, with our community garden, I always like to hear what has been good and what have been the challenges, because each project often does have challenges. We had an invasive spider mite this past summer, and when I looked it up from NC State, it was on our tomatoes. I'm like, oh, it's invasive, it's a spider mite. So sometimes you run into pest problems that you don't have before, and figuring out ways to overcome that. We thought that, go back one slide real quick. We thought that the next one, sorry, we don't have a clicker. This Mars Landing kale would be a really great kale to grow. Has anyone ever grown this? Yeah, it's pretty, but it doesn't have a lot of leaf surface. So that was one that was kind of like, we probably won't grow that again. Flexibility, teaching each other, making sure that you're open to many different abilities is always important. And then recommendations, follow your planting guidelines for timing. Anybody have a loop, like a jeweler's loop? Anybody? That's probably like one of the best investments, because you can just carry it in your pocket and look for small mites and any kind of insect on your plants, and they cost less than $10 on Amazon. So definitely recommend getting a loop. And be flexible, plant for beauty, have some beauty and flowers in your garden, and track what you're doing. We had this kohlrabi. That was one of those crops that we did very well with this year. But a lot of people don't know how to grow kohlrabi. So we were talking, how do you eat it? How do you grow it? How do you cook it? And now we can't keep kohlrabi out of the pantry. It's like it goes into the pantry and everyone wants kohlrabi. So we also have great partners, great volunteers. This is just a slide with all of the folks that we've worked on in this first year of our community garden, and all to whom we are eternally grateful, because it helps with the success of each of our programs. We've also got excellent patients, relationships, and we're working on those indicators to tell the story of community gardens. Real quick, shout out to IFAS in the back. This is a great app. It's free. You can pull it up on your phone. Florida Fresh Now. You put your zip code in, and it tells you what to plant this time of year. So it's a really great handy resource with pictures. So we typically will share this and use it as our planting guide. And then here's a picture of some really small loops that the Girl Scouts have used. And then you can get like jeweler's loops that are a little bit more intense with magnification, and use those to help you find things in your garden. So I just want to say thank you. Hopefully you've been able to learn a little bit about Tampa Family, think about ways to tell the story about your garden, and then just plant for beauty and flexibility and teaching